Hello and welcome to the CDO magazine interview series. My name is John Filipek with SHI International. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Garrett Berntsen, Deputy Chief Data Officer at the State Department. How are you doing today, Garrett?
I'm good, John. How are you?
Good, good. Super excited to talk about this particular topic. It's one that I feel, whether you're in the data community or not, always something to kind of understand, but specifically on the data side, right, is how do you acquire and obtain top talent? I think that's, certainly a thread that we've been able to speak to a couple individuals about to date. And it seems there is certainly a limited pool of people and a growing demand for, either
Yeah,
data scientists, data analysts, or folks like yourself, at the C-suite level. So certainly excited to get started here. But first and foremost, wanted to offer the floor back to you to introduce yourself, title, maybe some of the
sure.
projects that you've currently been working on.
Sure. Yeah, and thank you for having me. My name's Garrett Berntsen. Like you said, I'm the Deputy Chief Data Officer at the State Department. And really, for the last 2 or 3 years, we've been building a data program here at the Department of State, trying to bring evidence-based policymaking to the art of diplomacy. Before that, I spent some time as a sort of analytics consultant, and before that, I spent some time in the military as well. So I actually come from kind of like a family of people who worked at the department. My sister works here. I have had other family members here, sort of a family business, and I'm excited to be working with the department on these, really forward-leaning sort of modernization efforts. We are the oldest cabinet agency in the United States, and all the way back to, obviously Thomas Jefferson. And now we're trying to do things like use machine learning and AI and advanced analytics to make diplomatic decisions, and it's a great job.
Oh, I love that. And we had a previous interview where we were speaking with a gentleman at the Coast Guard, same type of thing, right? To come in and reinvent the wheel to some extent on how, you're looking at solving the business problems, and more importantly, just really putting a new, fresh perspective based on data, I think, into play, which is certainly a nice security blanket, I think, for all of us who count on you guys at, at your particular agencies to kind
Yeah,
of be the voice for us, the we the people piece of it. So
totally.
hearing then that you have, of course, family members on this one, this may, hit very easily for you, or you might be like, oh, actually, I don't know if we have any overlapping characteristics, but
Yeah.
what do you feel are the three, characteristics most often shared, either by CDOs or certainly within, the CDO community?
Yeah, I think kind of a two-part answer. I think on the one hand, the broader CDO community across government, because we're kind of small and scrappy and starting, somewhat from scratch over the last 5, years or a little bit more, we're really a collaborative group. When you're starting something new, you are figuring things out for the first time. You're trying to find out how someone in another agency solved a problem you're also trying to solve. And so that collaboration is super important. And the main sort of vehicle for that is the CDO Council. So there's a council of CDOs across government, led right now, I think, by Ted Koch and Dan Morgan, who are two kind of longtime CDOs, and they convene a number of working groups and collaborative, yeah, basically collaborative working groups to get together and actually try to solve problems. And I know for people who've worked in government before, you can sometimes people roll their eyes at like a working group. Oh, great, it's another working group. I got to join this call. I'm just going to sit there with my camera off and do other work. But the goal has been from day one of the CDO Council to like actually solve problems, to really give people tools and resources to expedite sort of evidence-based policymaking in government. That started actually simultaneous with the COVID outbreak, where the CDO Council was just getting stood up and said, what's a really data-driven public health problem is COVID, and we need to all be talking across agencies about how we're thinking about back to work, how we're thinking about mitigation from a data-driven sort of lens. So that's just one example of kind of the collaboration that this council has brought. On this, sort of second part of the question, what are the characteristics that sort of set our organization apart at the State Department that we're sort of proud of, is kind of three main sort of traits. And we look for these traits when we interview people, and we try to inculcate them in like kind of everything we do. And it's optimism, because if you're trying to do something new in a big organization, you have to be optimistic that there's a better way to do it and that you can make progress. But that optimism has to be paired with resilience, because if you are someone who gets worn down by people saying no or things not going your way in a short amount of time, you're going to throw your hands in the air. So you really have to be resilient. And then the third is entrepreneurial. I mean, government doesn't sometimes have a reputation for being entrepreneurial, but there are definitely ways to be entrepreneurial in government, to run towards problems, to be the team that raises their hand and say, hey, we can try to tackle this. And sometimes that means tackling or trying to tackle the hardest problems. We actually enjoy trying to tackle really hard problems. If you tackle a really hard problem, sometimes people will just say that's impossible. And that's a good thing, actually, because it means if you are unable to do it, you can say, yeah, you were right, it was impossible. But if you're able to actually execute on it, you can make a huge splash. And so those are our character traits that we really look for, and that kind of I think, hopefully set us apart here at the Center for Analytics at the State Department.
Yeah, no, and that's honestly an amazing mindset, I think, to have. And really, I think kind of leads me towards another question. I apologize, and maybe catching you with a little bit of a curveball here, but essentially,
Sure.
another theme that I've picked up on as I've interviewed a couple of these CDOs, right, is trying to get some of that internal buy-in across some of the other department heads, right? Like it's very much so early on here, right? You said within the last 5 years, a newer type of way to approach certain problem solving. So I guess my question is, do you feel as though when you go after those specific types of initiatives that are looked at as almost impossible, right? And knowing that even is it like on a baseball level, we're failing 70% of the time, you're still in the Hall of Fame because you've gotten enough support and buy-in from
Yeah.
that other 30% of knowing that, hey, you're still going to take that most impossible problem and put it onto your team's plate. And now it's truly going to be worked by an organization internally that, yeah, we vetted this out and we know it's impossible. Or, hey, we vetted this out. And guess what? We came up with A through Z in terms of different ways that we can try and go and solve that. That's both, I
Yeah.
think, inspirational, but does it get the necessary buy-in across the board? I think,
Right.
trying to tackle
Yeah.
problems that way.
So certainly you can't take on all the toughest challenges and not accomplish any of them.
Right.
That's a recipe for failure. But I do think there are some kind of keys to success if you're trying to do this. I mean, one is, yeah, you do have to be cognizant of like your sort of political capital. Do you have buy-in? And that's not we want to be data driven sort of people, but sometimes those are things that are not in a metric. You just have to have a good sense from talking to partners, from signals of the sort of bureaucracy that you're making progress. And that doesn't always have to be hitting a home run, to continue the baseball metaphor. That can be getting incremental success as a base hit, getting some moving the needle. But you can't show up. I'm just going to mix my metaphors, but we use the cooking show metaphor a lot here, which is like at the end of time, there's got to be something on the plate. You can't show up with nothing on the plate. It doesn't have to be perfect, but if you show up with nothing, you're gonna lose the cooking show. So we definitely try to find this balance between being super aspirational, and we want to be aspirational and say, yeah, we could use machine learning to improve this diplomatic process, or we could use data to make better management decisions. That's sort of aspirational, but we can't be so aspirational that if our solution comes in at the 50 or 60%, people are just completely disappointed. So that is a constant sort of communications challenge, expectations management challenge. And really, most of that is done through really good, clear communications of expectations. And honestly, sometimes just being candid that we're an optimistic group. We're gonna try to do the best we can, but of course, communicating when there are blockers and sort of challenges to that are maybe outside of our control.
So you had mentioned the resilience, the optimism, and the entrepreneurship. How are you able to identify those characteristics in maybe a couple rounds of interviews? Is it, word of
Yeah,
mouth from, other people within the community of how they've done previously? How are you able to really hone in on those three skill sets? Because those are three words I love, right? And I think
yeah,
anybody running a department would definitely benefit from having those three characteristics
sure.
in an individual. So how are you able to identify that?
Yeah. So, I mean, first, I think and foremost, our front office, like our leader team, knows how important, I use the term HR like kind of widely, but people, how important people are to the organization. And we are very conscious about spending the necessary time and energy of my boss, my boss's boss, myself. It is sort of it's a requirement for leaders in this organization to really focus on people. And that can be done in a lot of different ways. That can be done through um, expanding your network and trying to get out and meet people who are doing this work out in other agencies, in the private sector, in academia. We have tremendous tools to go out and sort of engage with people, and we shouldn't be super cloistered and insular. We need to go out and reach out to diverse communities of people and tell them. And I mean, partly that's why I'm here doing this right now. We have to communicate that this work is happening and
Mhm.
that it's interesting and it's impactful and it's for everybody. All Americans are welcome to participate, with the requisite skills. You have to meet the requirements, you have to get a security clearance. So there's some checks, there's some checks on this process, but it is a highly sort of inclusive workforce, and we need Americans to be engaged in this type of public service work. Um, we have also done what we can to cultivate a sort of brand, reputation for an office that is doing things differently, that's trying to move fast and innovate. And so when I share those three traits that we care about with you, we talk about that internally. We talk about that to our own team. We talk, and then they talk to other people and their communities and their networks. And people say, "Whoa, that's really cool. I would like to work on a team that prizes those types of skills and traits." So it can be self-reinforcing. If you build that culture internally, you try to retain people, you try to build people, they'll go and tell good people. Good people beget other good people and skills. Um, you know, on the outreach piece, like we also have been super conscious about using diverse networks to go and attract diverse communities of employees. So there's a group called Women in Data. There's a group called Blacks in Technology. There are many other interest groups for often underrepresented people in tech and in government. And we consciously try to reach out to them, ask them to share our job postings, have a webinar that explains how to navigate the federal HR process, which is not easy. And
Sure.
those types of outreach events are important. And we've seen some success. I mean, we had an opening for data science last year that was only open for 48 hours and filled 500 applicants in like 2 days.
Wow.
And that was through these efforts, and we're continuing to reap the benefits of that through fantastic team members, joining the team and doing sort of great work. So there's some of these things are we have federal HR rules and we follow those rules. They're important, but they're also expanding some of there are federal HR rules that are adjusting to some of these skills-based hirings through OPM and others. There's a program, and I always end up talking about this, but it's called the Subject Matter Expert Qualification Assessment. It is a long acronym that's called SMEQA. And it is a skills-based hiring approach that OPM has piloted, and that allows us to do basically testing in a fair way on data skills. And that has been tremendously valuable because on some of these skills-based hiring and some of these jobs that we need, you just have to have a certain baseline of technical
Yep.
skill to come in. and those willing to go through the process of taking a test and an online sort of exam. It's usually a take-home assignment kind of style. Those people are usually motivated to join the department if they're going to take that extra sort of step.
Both as somebody who's in charge of making decisions and your data background, but then how do you also frame those conversations with other decision makers of other departments to help them understand why it's important to leverage
Yeah.
kind of your startup feel company within the state here?
Yeah, I think, the there can be a hard challenge. I will be honest, because people do in a lot of lines of work have this sense that, like, my gut is based on 30 years or 40 years of experience, and it cannot be sort of replaced. Um, Anyone who feels that way still, I think we should watch Moneyball, because that is basically what the scouts also thought in baseball, just to continue to kill the baseball metaphor. And in finance too, it's the same thing. 30, 40 years ago, people in finance thought, no, stock pickers like that, it is a unique skill, it is exquisite, it'll never be sort of replaced. And that I think is pretty contested now in the finance industry. So I guess what I would say is, like, our take is you just must have both. Like, you have to have the gut, and you have to bring data to some of these questions. And I think they're not actually mutually exclusive. If a person is using their gut, what is their gut based on? It's based on their data. It is based
Mm.
on their 30 years or whatever of training data that's in their head. The same way that a data model or some sort of analysis is just using different data. So, I think it's really about bringing both of those things to decision making. If I'm asked a question, I often say, okay, if I don't have enough information to make a decision, I'm like, okay, what data do I need? That data could be a financial model, or it could be, I need to go talk to 3 people
Mm.
about something, because maybe it's a leadership decision and that's really hard to have metrics on, but I know 3 people who know this person I'm thinking about hiring. I trust those 3 people. I want their data. I want to know what their experience is on this person. So I'd say it requires both things, but it is really highly dependent on the type of question that is being asked. And you have to bring sort of different types of data and analysis, whether it's subject matter expertise, whether it's the output of some sort of analytical model to decisions. And then I guess the last thing I would say is, like, there are exquisite things I feel around, like, ethics and morality, which is like that is the last check on any decision making. Like, are we doing the right thing for our organization, for the American people? Maybe we'll get to a place where we have highly sophisticated ethics models, and I'm sure there are AI researchers working on that. But for now, I think it's like we as a community and leaders, especially in government, really have a high bar to have a human check on anything that could cause impact or or bias or harm, especially in public policy issues. Obviously, it's extremely important.
Thank you so much, Garrett, for joining
Sure.
us today. Everybody
Yeah.
in the audience, please feel free to visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, and be on the lookout for the additional parts of this series here. Thank you so much, everybody. And Garrett, have a great day.
Thanks. You too, John.